Welcome back. Today we have another email sent in by one of our listeners. If you want to send in an email, just send it to aipmtwins@gmail.com. aipmtwins@gmail.com. Now, I'm going to read it to you exactly as it was written. I'm going to change the name of the town because I looked it up and it's real. And I'm going to change one name because I genuinely think the person's still alive and I don't know what would happen if the wrong people recognized him. Everything else I'm leaving exactly as it was written. It begins, my name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm from a small town in the mountains of Oaxaca. It's Oaxaca. And I'm writing this because I need someone outside my family to know what happened to us, what my father did, what it cost. I need you to understand something about where I'm from before I tell you the rest. In the towns up in the Sierra Juárez, people still believe in things that the cities have mostly forgotten. Not because we're uneducated, but because we're close enough to the old world that we can still feel it breathing. The curanderos are real. The brujos are real. Brujos is witch in Spanish, and curanderos are healers. The things that move in the cornfields at night, those are real too, even if we don't always speak about them by name. My father's name was Aurelio. He was not a weak man. He was not a foolish man. He worked the milpa, the corn and the bean fields, the way his father had and his father's father before that. He rose up before the sun. He came home after dark. His hands were thick and brown and permanently stained with the red earth of the hillsides. He was proud of that. He said a man's hand shows his life. But there was a sickness in my father I didn't understand when I was a boy. I understand it now. His compadre, his oldest friend, the man who had stood by him at his wedding and been godfather to my older sister, was a man named Fortino. And Fortino, over the course of maybe 2 years, had become wealthy in a way no one in our town could explain. Not city wealthy, not corrupt official wealthy, something quieter and stranger than that. New corrugated roofing on his house when everyone else still had old cracked tiles, new tools, a truck, secondhand but running. His daughter's quinceañera that year was the most elaborate the town had seen in generations. The mole negro, the mezcal, the marimba band that came all the way up from the valley. People whispered. They always whisper. Some say Fortino had found money or a money lender in the city. Some say he sold something, land, a mineral right, something no one was supposed to know about. Some said darker things in voices so low you had to lean in to hear them. And when you did, they stopped talking and look at you like you already heard too much. My father watched all of this, and he burned, not from hatred of Fortino. He loved Fortino, That was the problem. When a stranger gets something you want, you can't dismiss it. When the man who stood at your wedding gets it, the men who laughed with you in the same dirt as children, it feels like proof that the universe sorta sorted you wrong. He asked Fortino about it once on the feast day of his patron saint, when the mezcal had made the night feel softer than it was. Fortino went quiet, in a way my father described to me years later as the quietest he had ever seen a man go, like a door shutting behind his eyes. Some things, Fortino said, a man carries alone. My father pressed him. Fortino drank, looked at the fire, drank again. And then, because the mezcal was good and the night was warm, and because they had shared 30 years of each other's lives, Fortino told him, not everything, but enough. He spoke about a place, a tianguis, a market that appeared at the crossroads outside of the town at midnight. Not every night. You couldn't find it by going to look. It found you when you were ready, which really meant when you were desperate enough. He said he had gone once, that he would never go again. He said the things for sale at the market could not be found anywhere else in the living world. I won't tell you more than that, Fortino said. And he stood up, and the conversation was over. The way certain conversations simply end and leave no door open behind them. My father told me later that he didn't sleep that night or the next. He lay in the dark beside my mother, Consuelo, and he stared at the ceiling, and he listened to her breathe. And he thought about the truck, the new roofing, the mole negro at the quinceañera, the way people in the plaza greeted Fortino. First now, the small unconscious deference that money produces in people who say they don't care about money. He thought about his own hand stained red, his father's hand, his grandfather's hand. The same hands doing the work, coming to the same nothing. On the fifth night, he made a decision. He waited until my mother was deeply asleep. He dressed in the dark, moving the way a man moves when he's already made a choice and the only thing left to do is to do it before he loses nerve. He walked out of our house and down the dirt road through the center of town, past the locked church and the dark market stalls and the dogs that watched him from the shadows without barking. He said the dogs didn't bark. He always mentioned that like it was important. He walked to the crossroads at the edge of town, where the road to the valley splits from the road that goes up into the mountains. Just a crossroads, packed earth, a wooden cross someone had put up years ago for a boy who died there in a truck accident, weathered to gray, leaning slightly. He stood there in the dark and he waited. He told me he almost left, that there was a long stretch of nothing, just the insects, just the wind through the corn, just the darkness, where he felt like a fool standing alone at the crossroads in the middle of the night, like a character in a story his grandmother would have told him. And then he smelled it, not rot, not earth, something older than both, something his body recognized before his mind did, some ancient warnings in the blood that said, here's a threshold, here's a door between things. And then he saw the lights. Now let me stop here for a second, because this is the part where I need you to understand something. My father was a practical man. He did not dramatize. He did not exaggerate. When he told me this story years later in pieces, never all at once, he described what he saw the way a farmer describes the weather, matter of fact, tired, like a man reporting something that happened to him, not a man performing a story. He said the market appeared the way a dream sometimes appears, not arriving exactly, but suddenly just there, like it had always been there, and your eyes had simply finally agreed to see it all. Stalls, fires, people moving between them. The fires burned real and hot, but they cast no shadows. Think about that for a moment. A fire with no shadows, because shadow requires something solid to interrupt light. And the things standing near those fires were not entirely solid. My father said he recognized some of the figures from moving through the stalls. The wife of a man who owned several fields on the eastern slope. A young man from a neighboring town who had recently come into money no one could account for. A woman who had been inexplicably healed of an illness the doctors in the city had called terminal. They were all there, moving through the stalls in their own private hungers. Nobody's making eye contact, no one speaking above a whisper. Everyone moving as if they were alone. My father walked in. He said the stalls were draped in black cloth, the same cloth you see at funerals. And the things displayed on the cloth, he could never describe them precisely. Not objects, exactly, more like the shape of things, the essence of power. Power had a form here. Prosperity had a color. He couldn't name in any language he spoke. Good fortune sat in a small clay vessel that seemed to pulse faintly like something living inside it. He moved through the stall slowly, and then one stopped him. He didn't choose it, he said that clearly. Every time he told me he did not choose it, it chose him. The way a dream sometimes fixes your feet to step one spot and won't let you move on. The merchant behind the stall was not a person. My father called it una sombra con manos, a shadow with hands, a darkness that stood upright behind the cloth, with hands that reached forward out of that darkness, and a presence that pressed against you like standing too close to a fire. On the cloth in front of him was everything he had ever wanted. Not objects, a life. The life he had been measuring himself against since childhood. Prosperity, standing, the kind of ease that meant his daughters would never marry men with permanently stained hands. The kind of house where the roof didn't leak when the rain came. The kind of life where people in the plaza stopped for him. He reached for it. The shadow's hands reached towards him at the same moment. Not towards his hands, but towards his chest. Not touching, just reaching. The way a curandero sometimes holds her hands above a patient without contact, feeling for something invisible. My father felt a warmth, brief, deep inside his chest, like an ember stirring, a heaviness. And then it was gone, so quick he almost wondered if he had imagined it. He didn't think about it. He had what he came for. He could feel it settling into him like water in dry ground. He walked back out through the shadowless fires, past the silent figures, past the edge of the crossroads. When he turned back, there was nothing there. Just a road, just a darkness, just a weathered gray cross leaning slightly the way it always had. He walked home through the mountain night, feeling like a man who had finally been given what was owed to him. He did not know yet what he had agreed to pay. 3 weeks after that night, things began to change for my father. A man from a village 2 hours away came looking for someone who knew the eastern slopes well enough to guide him and a survey team. My father happened to know those slopes better than anyone. The work paid more than he made in 3 months of farming. The harvest that year was extraordinary, not just good, the kind of harvest that makes your neighbors come look because they've never seen corn grow like that on hillside. The school teacher began asking my father's opinion at town meetings. The older men who had always spoken over him started letting him finish his sentences. My father walked differently. I remember this. I was 12 years old and I noticed it. This new weight in how he moved, like a man who has stopped apologizing for taking up space. But my mother began looking tired. Not sick, not in any way the doctor in town could point to, just tired. In a deep way, a way that sleep didn't fix. She started wearing her age differently. Lines at the corners of her eyes. Lines at the corner of her eyes that hadn't been there before. A slowness in her movements in the early mornings. A fragility in her wrist when she cooked. My father told himself it was the altitude, the work, the dry season. He believed himself because he needed to. And then Fortino collapsed, his old friend. He was found one morning on the floor of his kitchen by his wife, not dead, but emptied, like someone had quietly been draining something essential out of him for months. And now the vessel was nearly empty. The curanderos came. They burned copal and sage and spoke prayers. She said what was happening to Fortino had a name in the old language, a name that translated roughly as debt being collected. No one connected it to the crossroads. No one said a word out loud. A second man my father had recognized at the market, a man from the neighboring town who had come into unexplained wealth, began forgetting things. His wife's name, briefly, the way home from his own fields. He would stop mid-sentence and stand there with his mouth open and his eyes blank, like a man reaching for something on a shelf he could no longer find. The village called it age, called it something in his blood. My father slept deeply now, like falling into black water, and woke up each morning feeling like he hadn't slept at all. He told himself it was the increased responsibility. A man rising carries more weight, he said. That was all. It was my tia, my father's oldest sister, a woman who had never left the mountains and never intended to, who finally said what no one else would say. She came to our house one evening, and she sat across from my father at the table, and she looked at him for a long time without speaking, the way the old people look at you when they're deciding whether you can handle the truth. Then she said, Aurelio, whatever you bought, it is eating Consuelo. My father said nothing. I've seen this before, she said, not in my lifetime, but my grandmother spoke of it. The market at the crossroads takes payments in years, not money, not gold, years of life. And it does not always take them from the one who purchased. Sometimes it takes them from the one sleeping beside him. The room had no air in it. My father looked at my mother's wrist, thin, the way something looks when it's being slowly drawn from inside. He stood up and walked out the house. He went back to the crossroads. He stood at the crossroads for a long time before the market appeared again. When it did, he walked straight to the stall where with the shadow behind it, the darkness with the hands. "What did you take from me?" he said. He kept his voice steady. A man who has worked the mountain all his life knows how to keep his voice steady. "How many years? From whom?" The shadow did not speak. What it did was worse. It showed him, not in words, not in language, the way a dream shows you a truth directly without translation, bypassing the part of your mind that would argue with it. He saw the full accounting. He saw the years. His years, the ones that should have carried him through a long old age, taken from him quietly at the moment of purchase, already gone, already spent. He saw my mother. He saw her years flowing away from her like water through cracked clay, slowly, invisibly draining into the market's possession, payment for what he had bought. She had never walked to that crossroads, never stood at the stall, never reached for anything. She was paying a price she had never agreed to for a purchase she had never made. Because of him, because of his burning, he saw Fortino, his compadre, his brother, the man who had stood beside him at his wedding, running nearly empty, the last sand in the glass rushing down. He saw the others from that midnight market, each of them quietly hollowing out, season by season, year by year, paying in life for the things they had bought. He saw what the crossroads market was, not a gift, not an opportunity, not even a bargain, a trap, the most patient trap in the world, the kind that gives you everything you ask for, so that by the time you understood the cost, you have already accepted it, already spent it, already lost it beyond recovery. "Give them back," my father said. "Give back what you took from her." The shadow waited. "Give them back." The darkness with the hand simply stayed still. There was no returns at this market. What was purchased was purchased. What was taken was taken. The crossroads does not do mercy. My father walked home as the first light was coming over the mountains. He walked past his expanded milpa, past the new tools in the shed, past every visible sign of life he had bought. He sat down at the table in our kitchen. My mother was already awake. She always woke up early now. One of the changes he had never let himself examine too closely. She turned from the stove and she looked at his face and she set down her spoon. "Aurelio," she said, "what happened to you?" He could not answer her. What could he say? "I spent your years. I spent them without knowing, which is true, but which is no excuse. You are older than you should be because I was burning with wanting. I cannot undo it. I cannot give it back. The crossroads has no refund, no forgiveness, no door back to the way things were." So he said nothing. He got up from the table and he went to her and took her face in both of his hands, his thick, red-stained, worn-down hands, and he looked at her for a long time. She let him. She didn't know why. She told me later she felt something pass between them that she couldn't name, a gravity, a sorrow, so complete it had gone quiet on the other side of its own weight. He spent the rest of his years that way, not chasing anything, not wanting anything beyond what was in front of him, sitting beside my mother in their evenings, watching the light change over the mountains, holding her hand, growing old beside her, both of them aging faster than they should have, the debt coming due in both of them now, the clock running for them both. He told me the story in pieces, never all at once. A piece of paper when I was 16, another piece when I was 22, about to leave for the city. The last piece the year before he died, when he was 61 years old and looking 80. He said, Mijo, I want you to know the whole thing, not as a warning. You're too old for warnings. As a confession. He said, I thought I was hungry for something I deserved. I thought wanting more was the same as being owed more. I didn't understand that the wanting itself was the door, that the market doesn't come looking for thieves or fools. It comes looking for people who have confused desire and debt, people who believe the universe owes them a better accounting. He said, be careful of what you're willing to pay. Not because sacrifice is wrong, but because the market picks the currency and you don't find out what you've spent until you see it leaving someone you love. My mother outlived him by 4 years. She was 70 when she died. She looked 90. I don't know if what I've written here is something that you can use, and I don't know what I expected when I typed it out. I just needed someone to know, he says. The crossroads is still here. The gray cross is still leaning. Some nights when the wind comes down from the mountain and the dogs go quiet, I think about Fortino. Said to my father before he died, he said, I went once, I will never go again. He was trying to warn him. My father was too hungry to hear it. That's where the comment ends. I read it 3 times. I looked up the region they described in Oaxaca. The Sierra Juárez is real. The towns up there are real. The old beliefs about the crossroads, about the markets where the dead sell to the living, about spiritual debt paid in years of life. All of this is documented, real folklore, real warnings that real people have been passing down for generations. I don't know if Aurelio is real, but I know that when I finished reading this the second time, I sat very still for a while because there's a version of that market that doesn't appear at the mountains or crossroads at midnight. It appears in offices in comparison, in the quiet burning that starts when someone you grew up with gets something you wanted and you can't sleep, and you start asking yourself what you will be willing to do to get it, what you'd be willing to spend, what you'd be willing to let someone else pay if you didn't look too carefully at where the cost was going. The shadow with the hands doesn't only stand behind cloth in a forest. Sometimes it waits in the space between what you have and what you think you deserve. And the currency is always the same. You just don't see it leaving. Let that breathe for a minute. If this story moved something in you, leave a comment. Tell me what it made you think about. I read every single comment. So subscribe. More stories coming. And maybe another story about a lady in the borderlands soon. As always, sleep with the lights on. Buenos noches.